Okay.
You have a text message.
Oh, man!
Login authorized.
Okay.
Login authorized.
Okay.
You have a text message.
All right, we should all give Raj a round of applause because he can play the keys and sing and get out from the maze that he has to get out during that video. I was watching him leave the stage. I'm like, bro, that's a skill. Let's give him a round of applause. That's a skill. The man deserves a round of applause for being able. I would not fit. I'm learning that about myself. I would not fit. I would be stuck back there, and we'd be here all day. So my name's Jason. I get to be the pastor here, and super excited today to talk about this movie called Vengeance. It's an interesting movie. We are in a series called Everything I Know About Life I Learned From, and we're just looking at how to find value in a world full of voices. And this idea for the series comes from this particular story. And so I'm really excited about it today. This movie is a movie addressing the divide in America and about how media and social media increase the divide between us. One of the ideas pushed in the movie is that people achieve a common goal if they have a common enemy, and that hate spreads faster than truth and love is kind of like this thought pushed into this movie. Now, what's interesting about this movie is I didn't know anything about Ashton Kutcher at all. I thought he was the guy from Punk'd, right? Like, or Dude, Where's My Car? That was my entire knowledge of him. But I found out through studying this that he actually is one of the most outspoken voices now to fighting human trafficking. He's really trying to put a stop to human trafficking. And he's friends with B.J. Novak, who is the one of the people from the show The Office. And so when B.J. Novak wrote the script and directed this thing and did all the stuff for the movie, he reached out to Ashton Kutcher first because they were friends. And the movie is supposed to be about this man coming from New York to Texas to try to solve a crime. I don't want to spoil it for you, but and he quickly realizes that he has prejudices against the people from Texas, and the people have prejudices against him because he's from New York. But really, the movie is actually all about the idea that we all can often be guilty of holding certain prejudices against certain people and holding this against them. And then the movie talks about how the things in front of us increase that and increase it and increase it. So I'll give you a line from it to show you what I'm talking about. There's a line from the movie, and the man says, "What do you love about Texas?" And everybody then yells a word that I'm still trying to understand. Not being remotely close from Texas, I think maybe Brian Sanchez has to explain this word to me, but they all say either Whataburger, 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 or Waterburger. And I don't know which one it is. I think it's What a Burger. I think that's the name of the restaurant, but it sounds like they're all saying Waterburger. So I Googled Waterburger, and I'm like, that's not it. I don't know what it is. So I'm assuming they're talking about Whataburger restaurant. So he says, "What do you love about Texas?" And they say, "Whataburger." And they say, "It's the best." And he replies, "What makes it the best?" And they say, "Well, wherever you go, it's right there. It's always right there." And this line is written so brilliantly because it's supposed to be a humorous moment, but actually he's trying to tell you what the entire story is about. And what he's telling you is what you put in front of your eyes matters. See, people go to Whataburger and they love Whataburger in Texas because it's always there. Everywhere they go, it's there. We could probably say about Ohio that we love Starbucks. And someone would ask us why, and we would say, well, it's there. Everywhere you go, literally everywhere, it's there. If there's not a Starbucks, there's a Tim Hortons, right? Or a Dunkin' Donuts. One of those three, we would say we love them. And then if we really boiled it down to what did we love about it, well, it's there. And I think we could talk about restaurants and we could talk about all these ideas, but The truth is, most American people live this way. We choose what we choose because it is what is in front of us. So culture tries to put things in front of us. I don't know about you, but I had this awakening right about the time Usher started going, yeah, you know. I realized all of the marketing in this entire Super Bowl is for old people, and I am those people. Because like literally you are marketing everyone I knew from the 90s and early 2000s. They're all here. You brought them all to get my money. What we put in front of us matters. Culture realizes that, and this is why the Super Bowl has the commercials, and it's why all of these things. It's why if you talk about something, if we talk about something here, I have no doubt that all of you, you're welcome. We'll get a Whataburger ad on your Instagram after this service. You're welcome for that. Culture's figured out people choose things based off of what's in front of them. And unfortunately, so this means that whatever is in front of us matters, particularly when it comes to spiritual things. Because so often in our life, our enemies figured out if I can just put something in front of you all the time, you will choose based off of what I put in front of you. And this is rough because Satan hates our families. He does. He hates your marriage. He just does. He hates you trying to have a relationship with God. So he will put everything he possibly can in front of us so that we will literally choose anything except for the right thing. Because he doesn't need to put the wrong things in front of you. He just needs to put enough voices around you and enough people around you that are going to encourage you to go anywhere but the way that you should go. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. He's going to put anything in front of you and surround you with as many voices as he possibly can so that you will choose something besides him. This is why it is so important. It's a reminder for me that as parents, we should parent. Because our kids spend half of the year in school, and they come home and they're tired and we're tired, and it's really tempting to just put on something. But the number one place that children are exposed to adult content is YouTube Kids, by people who think it's fun to sneak that in. And we cannot trust anyone to parent our children except for us. So what we put in front of them matters. So we have to make sure that we're not just simply sending them to their room because we're worn out and overstimulated, and so are they, and saying, here, let this screen disciple you, because kids will choose what's in front of them. So Satan puts everything he possibly can in front of them. The same is true for our marriages. If we put in front of our eyes affairs and divorces and raunchy things and drama and constant fighting and all of the stuff that culture tries to put in front of us, it will not help us choose our marriage when we're in the middle of our own stuff. If we allow our phones to be in front of us all night, we will choose things on those phones that should not be in front of us. What we put in front of us matters. Cultures figure this out. Movies have figured this out. Television, social media, whatever, streaming, all the things have figured this out. And so we need to be cognizant of it, and we need to choose on purpose to put the right things in front of us. Why? Because we choose based off what's in front of us. We choose Starbucks because there's one on every corner. And it's the best because it's there. So what we put in front of us, what we put in front of our kids, what we put in front of our families, what we put in front of our relationship matters. We need to put good in front of us. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 14. The heart of him who has understanding seeks after knowledge, but the mouths of fools feed on folly. And we can make this argument, oh, well, what I'm doing, what I'm looking at, what I'm observing is not sin. It's not like I'm watching inappropriate things, so it's not sin, but I'm just spending hours. But look at 1 Corinthians 6:12. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. And this is such an important distinction. We as Christians so often are so guilty of saying, well, can you prove to me it's sin? No. But can you prove to me that it's helpful? No. So if it's not helpful, don't put it in front of you. He goes on, he says, all things are lawful, but I will not be dominated by anything. Ask yourself, I'm not dominated by anything. Cool, lock your phone away for 24 hours. It's really tough to do. It's really tough to do. What we put in front of us really matters. Psalms 101, verse 3. I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. I hate the work of all who fall away. It shall not cling to me. How we do things matters. What we put in front of us matters. So in here you have, hey, I won't set anything that's sinful. Then you have, I won't set anything that's not helpful. And then you have, I will not set before me anything that's worthless. I won't put in front of myself things that are of no value. So the enemy knows this, so he tries to put as many things in front of us and as many voices around us as he possibly can. And he starts off with voices that distract us, voices that distract us. This is a quote from the movie. There's a music producer, and he's talking to a man who's interviewing him, and he says, the problem is not that people are not smart, it's that they are. The problem is you have a bunch of bright creative lights, but nowhere to plug in the energy so it gets channeled into all of these other things. And I find this to be so true in our life. We spend so much time now observing. We are observant people, and observant is good, but we spend so much time of people observing other people that we spend very little time creating. I mean, think about, it's so fascinating to me. I'm just old enough now where I'm like, man, I'm too old to understand that. But back in the day, we played games, and now kids watch people play games. And I'm like, why are you watching them? Who cares what they... Go beat them, right? Like, go show them how to play, right? But what happens in our life is we are so busy observing how everybody else lives their lives. Social media, reality TV, it's all about trying to get you to watch and observe them live their lives that we are so often guilty of not living our own lives. Don't allow voices that distract you from being present in your life. Live, create. Create family time, create relationships, create culture, create new ideas. I like to talk about movies a lot, clearly, but one of the things about movies that I'm like so annoyed with now is that everything is either a rerun, or a remake. I'm like, can you not come up with an original idea anymore? We even remade Roadhouse. Like, you don't need to mess with Roadhouse. Let it be. Roadhouse is Roadhouse. We don't need a new Roadhouse. But this is because so often our culture is so distracted by observing that we don't have time to create. So we don't have the spots to plug the energy that we have into. So we don't have the ideas. We don't have the thoughts. We don't develop. So what I'm saying is the average family spends 12 minutes per day around the table. But we spend hours, 6 to 7 hours on our phones. So let's just take back an extra 18 minutes and say, hey, for 30 minutes, we're going to sit at the table with no phones, and let's create family time. Let's stop observing how other families tell us that we should be living, and instead, let's live together. I remember growing up, my family, we had a very, very firm structure to how we ate dinner. And I look back at that now, and it brought me so much peace as a kid that I wasn't even really like aware of until now that I'm older, and I'm like, man, that was super peaceful for me. Because I knew every day, no matter what, we did this, and then this, and then we prayed, and I knew my dad would take my dad every meal would roll his sleeves up, and then he would take mashed potatoes, because if it didn't have mashed potatoes, you didn't eat. Like, you got to have mashed potatoes or it's not a meal. And he would like put a line through his mashed potatoes, and then he'd put butter, and he'd do it again, and then salt, and do it again, and then pepper again, and then he'd be like, all right, let's pray. And we'd just be sitting there watching him like, come on. I just played basketball. Feed me. But there's so much peace now that I look back at, like, our family created this concept for us of time together. We can surround ourselves with voices that distract us. They may not devour us, they may not be weapons of the enemy, but they sure enough distract us. Think about it like this. So often in family relationships now, we're worn out. We get the kids to bed, and what do? We get on two separate screens, so we're in the same room but living two different lives and observing countless other lives. And so we don't have time to focus on the one we pledged our very life to. Put the phones away. Lock them in another room. You don't need to know what so-and-so believes about politics tonight. It's midnight. They're going to change by tomorrow anyways. Put the phones away. Learn who each other is all over again. We need to put down voices that distract us. Number two, we need to put down voices that discourage us. In this movie, there's this line. It says, everybody has a take. And if you don't have a take, you don't have a voice. And if you don't have a voice, you no longer exist. Everything means everything, so nothing means anything. And the person who's saying this in this movie is trying to discourage someone who's trying to do what's right, and he's saying nothing means anything anymore. He's trying to discourage him. And I find so often in our lives that we have people in front of us regularly trying to discourage us. Consistent, continual discouragement and a bombardment of discouraging voices. This is what makes family time so important, because your kid's been discouraged all day while they were at school. And so they need you to pour the love and the support and the encouragement back into the kid. Your spouse has been discouraged all day at work. All they've done all day online and in person has been told who they are not and what they do not provide for you. And so when we get together, when we sit down and we silence the voices and we put the right people in front of us, we need to make sure that we have people who are not discouraging us. And instead, we need to build each other up. The word encourage literally means to place courage into. And we need to have times, and we need to have voices, and we need to have people who we put courage into. I believe with all my heart, the reason so many of us, and I say us, struggle with so many things is because we don't have people putting courage into us. And so we're consistently anxious because we don't have that person saying, you can do this, I believe in you, you've got this. Because let's be honest, being a parent's hard. It's hard. I took Isla sledding last night, and I don't know what it's like for you, but it took us like 2.5 hours to get dressed, and then we sledded for like 20 minutes, and they were really fun, and then the last 5 minutes were really not fun, and then it took us 2.5 hours to get changed. It's hard to be a parent. It's hard. We were on this hill, and I just grew up different, and so the way I grew up is like if you walk up the middle of the trail, you get run over, and then you won't walk up the middle of the trail again. Like, that's how you learn. That's how I learned, like, hey, walk around. But the other parents who are there are like, hey, sweetie, let them walk up. Don't go. I'm like, no, go, run them over. Like it's hard to be a parent. It's difficult. Everybody gets a turn. I'm like, yeah, the fastest one gets the most. Go, girl, down to the bottom, right? Everybody does. Y'all can go when she's dusting you, right? It's hard to be a parent. It's hard to get relationships right. It's hard to be polite to everyone that you encounter all day. It's not easy. And you need to silence and limit the voices that discourage you. You have enough people telling you that you don't know how to be a mom. You have enough. You have enough people telling you that you don't know how to be a dad. You have enough people telling you that you're doing everything wrong when it comes to parenting or being married. I was talking about this last week, but there's a video on Instagram going around right now, and it's a guy only eating the food that influencers say you should eat. And he literally has an empty plate, and he's just pretending to eat an empty plate as every influencer comes on and is like, stop eating vegetables, they're going to kill you. And then the next one will come on like eat only meat, don't eat any meat. And then the next person comes on, never eat fruit. And then the next person comes on, and they're all disagreeing with each other, and is just showing you like then there's nothing, right? And this is why it's so important that we limit voices that discourage us. If every show you watch tells you that being married is the worst thing ever, and it's the end of all good, then stop watching the shows. Because I found that I love marriage a lot, and I think it's really fun, and I love it a lot more when I limit the people who tell me how bad it is. Josh and I, we always joke about this, but one time we went somewhere with some friends, and the entire time, all they wanted to talk about was how much they didn't like their wife. It was like the entire thing. This is terrible. Marriage is awful. And Josh and I were both like, I don't think we want to hang out with them because actually we like our wives. It's kind of fun. Like marriage is really cool. You got to limit the voices that discourage you. Thirdly, you got to limit the voices that won't develop you. Limit the voices that won't develop you. This is one of the key quotes from this movie. There's two men talking. One is a recording artist, and one is someone who's doing a podcast. And the man who's the recording artist says, "Who's your favorite artist?" And then he says, "Don't answer. You're a playlist guy, aren't you?" And the guy's like, "I don't know." And he says, "Playlists are songs you genuinely like, but you have no idea who sings it. Playlists are the dating app for music. You aren't hearing anyone else's voice. You're just hearing your own voice played back at you in different ways." And I have found that this is the most difficult thing when it comes to social media, is so often all we are hearing is our own voice played back to us in different ways. Because literally, Google, Facebook, all the companies, they have figured out ways to just make you continue to watch by putting people in front of you who agree with you on whatever it is they know you agree with. And they know what you agree with because they spy on you, right? So they know. And so recently, there was a company that figured this out, and this company was in Russia, and so it had two rallies in one town. Both rallies were done through a social media site, and both rallies were targeting and talking about how we should be fighting the other group. And the same company made both rallies as a social experiment, and they experimented on people in America from Russia, and they found that all these people who saw this one rally, they all went there, and they were all mad at these people who saw this rally over here. And the reason they saw the rally was because it agreed with everything they already believed on social media. We need voices that develop us. Think about Proverbs 27, verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Sometimes we need that one friend who will say, "Hey, I love you, but you got this wrong. I love you, but this needs to change." Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14, so that we be no longer children, tossed to and fro by the waves, and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, even Christ. We need voices that will help develop us. We need voices that will occasionally say to us, "Hey, dude, I love you, but you got to calm down on that. Like, you got to let that one go. Hey, I love you, but you got to move on from this. Hey, I love you, but you treated that person wrong. Hey, I love you, but this isn't it. Hey, I love you, but..." We all need certain voices that will develop us, and we won't find them strictly on social media. What we will find on social media or in television is that what we already believe is the channel that we'll continue to watch. What we already believe is the things that we'll continue to receive. And so part of church, part of community, part of relationship, part of my job, part of what I am required by God to do is to help develop you. It is to say things that are often like, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. What I've done recently in my life is I've surrounded myself with some pastors who just don't agree with me theologically. And because they challenge me. And I'll say, hey, I think this. And one of them will be like, that ain't it. And then I'll look it up and be like, you're right. You're right. And then I'll say this, or he'll say this, and I'll be like, that ain't it. And they'll look it up and be like, hey, you know what? I think you're right. And we are developing and pushing each other. We need voices in our lives that develop us. This is why when church is uncomfortable, it's the right one. This is why when community's a little bit uncomfortable, like, hey, when you get around friends who don't just agree with you, but actually instead say, hey, maybe you should look at it from this way. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. We need voices that will develop us. But the fourth one that culture throws at us is voices that desensitize us, voices that desensitize us. One of the lines from the movie is this: these characters, and that's what they are going to be, characters and not people. And it's this, he's talking about a person who died and a person who's upset, and he refers to them as characters, and the person in the movie is like, they're not people, they're characters, because we're going to put them on a podcast or we're going to put them in a show, and they'll go from being a person into being a character. And I've found that this is what seems to be the case in our culture so often, is we have removed the person and we have view everybody as a character. So there has to be a bad guy because we have to have a bad guy because we need a character. We no longer can agree to disagree. We have to agree that you're wrong, and so I can never speak to you again because you're wrong. And this is what has happened in our culture. Our culture has removed people and turned them all into characters. This is why you can get on anyone's social media and look at a post and read the comments directed at them about the post. And you realize that our culture is slowly going away from personal relationships into characters. Because it's okay for me to say what I want to say about a character. I would never say it about a person. But because I don't know them and they're behind some keyboard somewhere, then it's okay for me to say what I'm saying. And we attack and we destroy and we cut down because culture is desensitizing us with this sort of living each and every day. But your spouse is not a character. Your children are not characters. Your friends are not characters. Your school teacher's not a character. They are a person. And they mean well. And sometimes we all get that email where we're like, I think that you're the worst ever, right? But they mean well and they love well and they're really intending. They are a person. And Jesus said about people, we should do unto others as we'd have them do unto us, which is called the golden rule, which is interesting because Rome had a rule that said, don't do anything to somebody that you wouldn't want them to do to you. But Jesus said, that's cool, but think about it this way. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. So, in Jesus' eyes, if I want respect, I need to respect. If I want humility and grace, I need to be humble and gracious. Tim McGraw said we should always be humble and kind. If I want love, I need to love. And I need to understand that every voice on every screen right now, and every voice on all the channels, and every voice on all the streaming, all of these things are turning people into characters. To the point where 3 out of 10 Americans now think that it's okay to have physical violence against somebody who doesn't agree with you. Now, why do they think that? Because they're being told that those people are characters. So if you don't agree with me, you must be this. And so it's okay for me to act like this. But Jesus said, do unto others to people who had enslaved and imprisoned him. By the time Jesus said this, his father was most likely dead. He was living and surrounded by people who were subjugated by enemies, who were known historically for their cruelty. And he said, treat them the way you want to be treated. What's he doing? He's restoring personality back into relationships that were based only on character. Before you type it, remember that it's a person. before you share it, remember that it's a person. Before you post it, remember that there's people who see it. Before you say it, remember that it's a person. And it might be fun to share all the drama, but those are people. They're real people. They're not characters. So if we're going to remove these voices, then we need to add voices in. We need to add the right voices. We need to add voices that will encourage us. We need to add voices that will challenge us. We need to add voices that will grow us in gratitude. And we need to add voices that will teach us. These are the voices that we need to surround ourselves with. These are the things that we need to surround ourselves with. These are the places we need to go. We need to look for voices that will encourage us. We need to look for voices that will simultaneously challenge us. We need to look for voices that will help us grow in gratitude. This is why worship is so important. Listen, you might not love every song, but the idea of gratitude before God is so important. This is why it's important to come in and be a part of worship. I know you love me, and I know you want to hang out, and I know I'm the coolest guy possibly since Brad Pitt. I get it. I always think there's Thor, Brad Pitt, and me. It's like us three. We're the three coolest. But worship will help you grow in gratitude. Find people that will help you grow in gratitude. You know what I would do? I would find someone who loved their spouse and all they ever did was talk about how thankful they were for their spouse. And I would ask them, how do I do that? Because it's easy to find people who complain about their spouse. It's really easy to find people who complain about being a dad. Like, I don't have to search far to find many guys who are like, being a dad's the worst. Being married's the worst. But I found that it's a lot harder to go to guys and be like, tell me what you love about being a dad. And when I find them, those are the guys I want to be around. Find those voices. Find the voices that teach us. Proverbs 18 verse 15 says, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Proverbs chapter 20 verse 5, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Worship team, you guys can come on up here. Jesus told this story, and it's one of those stories that when you read it, you're like, that's really fascinating. Like, he has some incredible stories, but this one. And he tells this story about this guy, and he says that there's a spirit removed from this guy's house, and it wanders the earth. And it comes back and finds the house completely empty. And so it invites the friends, and they all come back, and now this man's situation is worse than it was before. And I think often, even especially us preachers, I guess, I won't even say even, I'll say especially, we often become so consumed with telling you what to avoid and what not to do and what not to put into your life that we often don't focus on what we should put in our life in its place. And so I could tell you right now, hey, Lent is here, you should fast from social media until Easter. And I think that will probably last until about 4:30 this afternoon, and you'll be really fired up about it and excited until maybe about 5:30, and then you'll be on there more than you were because you're like, what did I miss? But what I would encourage you to do is instead put good in. Find Bible studies, find devotionals, find resources, find content that's good. And it's not good just because it's Christian, because I find in churches now, I see this thing, and it's like, we've learned from culture how to divide people. So what we can do is, as people who have screens in front of us or microphones or cameras, is it's a lot easier to draw a crowd by pointing out what's wrong with everybody else. And so even in Christianity, what we've done now is we've learned from the politicians and we've learned from the social media people that rather than tell anybody what we believe, let's just point out what's wrong with everyone who disagrees, and then people will follow us and we'll get more money and more followers. But that wasn't Jesus' way. Jesus' way was to talk to them about, hey, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Follow me. All who come to me will find rest. He rarely focused on what was wrong with the Romans. These are their oppressors. And if he wanted to lead a revolt based entirely on him, he probably could have. He was that intelligent. But he would have done it by saying, hey, the Romans are doing this, the Romans are doing this, the Romans are doing this, the Romans are doing this. But instead, what did he do? Come to me, all you who are weary, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon me. He quoted scripture. He asked questions. And he pointed to the way. He pointed to the light. He pointed to the truth. And so find content that points to the way. Find contents that point to the truth, to the light. Find content that points to Jesus. Find content that doesn't divide you from the people sitting around you, but instead that draws you closer to them. Find content that's not focused on, well, my parents are wrong about everything. There's such a push on your kids and your teenage kids to point out. Every show now tells you what's wrong with the parents. The parent has to be wrong in everything. And I get it. I'm a parent. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes I tell my daughter to go down a hill when she shouldn't. We get it wrong. Like, they'll learn. No, that's not the right way. But I would fill my house with voices that reminds me and my kids and my spouse how much we love each other, not everything wrong with each other. I would find voices, men, that tell you that you can be more than someone who drinks beer and tells dad jokes and that's it. You can be more than that. You're called to be more than that. So find the voices that say, be all that God called you to be, and lean into them, and limit the voices that say, hey, you are nothing more than a Budweiser ad on two legs. Find the voices that say, man, as a man, I can do this. I can dream big. I can, as a mom, as a lady, as a woman, I can dream big. I can do this. I can go for this. I have this hope and this dream. Find those voices that help push you towards it and develop you along the way. Find voices that pull your kids towards you as a family, not away from you. But most of all, the voice that we all need each and every day is the voice of Jesus. It doesn't do any good to not be on social media if you're not actually filling that time with Scripture. I want to encourage you today, the entire point of this sermon is I want you to put your phones down during dinner this week and instead do any form of a devotion. Any form. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes. You don't have to preach an hour-long sermon. Your kids will be grateful you didn't. But find, even if it's going and playing the sermon at dinner time, even if it's going and picking up one of the resources we have out there for you, even if it's just spending 2 minutes saying, hey, I'm thankful for you, and I'm thankful for you, and I'm thankful for you, find a way to put your phones down, shut the screens off, and get 30 minutes of your day dedicated towards drawing you closer to each other. Jesus unites us. He doesn't divide us. So I'm going to ask you all to stand to your feet right now. Maybe, like me, this is a harder sermon where you're like, man, I got some things. I got some voices. I've allowed some things into my life that they're not developing me. To be honest, they're just wasting my time. Maybe the decision for you today is, hey, you're going to put aside the things that are just wasting your time, and you're going to invest in the things that are good. Maybe it's those that discourage you. Maybe it's those that desensitize you, or you're starting to realize, like, man, I'm not really viewing them the way Christ views me. Or maybe the decision today is you need to begin the relationship with Jesus Christ. And you find that His voice does develop you, and it does encourage you, and it does point you towards loving each other and those around you. Whatever that decision is, I'm going to encourage you to make it. I'm going to encourage you to think through it. I'm going to encourage you to take a moment just in this space. I'm going to ask you all to bow your heads and close your eyes and just say,